Taking all the sunshine, bottle up the rain. Go where the wind blows, let it show the way. Open all the windows, let in all the light. You can pull the stars down, paint the perfect sky. So go and write your song. The world will sing along. Jump in, and we don't know where we'll end up, so you might as well begin. Memories you're making, you frame inside your heart. In the middle of a nowhere, so somewhere you can start. So go and write your song. The world will sing along. Oh, life's what you're making. Sunshine, bottle up the rain. Go where the wind blows, let it show the way. Life's what you're making. Oh, life's what you're making. Oh, it's yours for the taking. Go and write your own song. All the world will
Hello. Happy Austin Startup Week, everyone. If you could slowly start making your way to your seats, we're going to get started in just a few moments. And come up to the front. Let's fill the front first. Awesome. Good evening. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Ashley Jennings. I'm one of the program managers for the Kelleher Center for Entrepreneurship at UT Austin. We're one of the leading centers for entrepreneurship and innovation at UT, and we're focused on getting undergraduate and graduate students the resources, capital, network they need to be successful. We're joined today by two fellow Longhorn family members. We're so excited to have them. Hook 'em. And without further ado, we'll just get the conversation going. But first, I wanted to introduce our amazing moderator. Andrea Coleman is an active Austin. Yes. Yes, everyone sit in front of Josh.
Do that.
Engaged. Yes. Good. That's good. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, there we go. Good call, Josh. And we're excited to be a part of Austin Startup Week. This is the first ever university track of Austin Startup Week, so we're so excited to be here at Capital Factory. Without further ado, Andrea Coleman is an active Austin angel investor, advisor, and startup champion. Launcher Ventures engages with startups tackling massive global challenges with deep technology. Her interests include AI, big data and analytics, blockchain, GPU accelerated tech, security, and web optimization. She connects with high-impact, fearless founders. She's active here at Capital Factory, Techstars, Mass Challenge, and the Dell Medical Catalyst program. She started her career in NYC at Solomon Smith Barney Media Investment Bank, has an undergrad from UW-Madison and her MBA from UT Austin. Without further ado, Andrea.
Thank you. This is so much fun. Thank you all for being here for the first Macombs UT Startup Week participation. And thank you for coming in from California.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm going to start the evening by reading Arjun's biography. And then we have 5 written questions, which honestly, Ashley just told me if we never got to any of them, she wouldn't be mad because Arjun is an unbelievable source of knowledge. So this is going to be fun. This is going to be interactive. This is going to be upbeat. And this is why we're here. So let's start with Arjun's biography. Arjun is a partner of Floodgate. And leads the firm's investment in opportunities that transform the IT stack in ways that help companies change the way we do business and we compete. He has some fantastic thoughts on AWS and Amazon. I would highly encourage that you ask him about those. Before Floodgate, Arjun was the CTO at Cambridge Technology Enterprises, a publicly traded cloud computing company, where he launched and led their cloud strategy, products, and services. He holds multiple technology patents that have been cited as prior art by firms like Apple, AT&T, and iRobot. He also had several technology development and management positions in consumer and enterprise software, including Microsoft, Motive, which was founded by Mike Maples, and IBCC. Arjun graduated with not only honors, these were special honors and highest honors. Wow, summa cum laude, with BS in computer science from the University of Texas at Austin, where he was an endowed presidential scholar and a recipient of the Vice President of Research Fellowship. He also has an MBA from another institution you may have heard of called Harvard, where he was one of the 32 nationwide PD Soros Fellows. So I feel like we're in good hands. You agree?
My voice is shot, but apologies to all the founders in advance for shooting a lot of productivity of your startups. I hope this is helpful and useful.
That was absolutely very fun. But so we're going to start with something very fun. What is, in my mind, Floodgate's most famous investment is? Anyone know? I've got it on my phone. Twitter. So So it would be really fun if everyone was tweeting this evening. But Floodgate has funded Twitter, Lyft, Twitch, which my son can't get enough of, and I don't understand. How do companies like Twitter and Lyft go from idea to being worth nearly $16 billion? So what's it like to be on the team? How do you find these people? And what do you hope to achieve in the world?
Oh boy. So how do we find them? I mean, we're always looking for smart individuals, smart folks who, we try to discern early on. Are you a visionary or are you having visions, right? So we try to figure that out early on. But in these cases, and I think these are all interesting examples because what they ended up as or are today are not what they started out as. Mike got involved, who was one of the founding partners of Floodgate, got involved in Twitter when it was actually Odeo, the podcasting company. So Ev Williams, as some of you may know, had just sold Blogger to Google, and he launched Odeo to help people put podcasts out. And this was Mike's first investment. And literally, I want to say 2 or 3 weeks later, Apple announces podcasting for free in iTunes. So Mike's like, oh crap, there goes the company. Not sure what's going to happen. And I fought the fight for a little while, but then because he had made some money before, he went back to all the investors and started returning their money. And Mike was like, no, I invested in you. What are you working on, and what are you going to do next? And he's like, oh, we got this thing on the side. We're kind of excited by it. We're probably going to call it Voicemail 2.0 or TWTTR. We're not quite sure. And then Mike said, sounds interesting. What does it do? He's like, well, you tell her what are you doing in 140 characters or less. Mike is like, okay, then what? He's like, that's it. He's like, okay, how are you going to make money? He's like, I don't know. And he's like, why is this a product, much less a company or a business? And the insight that Ev had, which is one of the things we always try to look for, was pretty compelling. So he said when he had launched Blogger, he made it easy for people to put weblogs up. So it made it easy for anybody to publish content. They got 1 million users. Google ended up acquiring them. When he went with podcasting, I don't know how many of you actually try to put out a podcast. It's fairly involved. You got to do RSS feeds. You got to record and upload. You got to set up a whole bunch of stuff, and that's just cumbersome. So he said, making it more difficult for people to publish content didn't seem like the right thing to do. So he went the other way, and he said, I want to make it super easy to just say what's on your mind. And if you can get 10 million users to use it, he'll figure something out. And Mike was like, sounds interesting, count me in. So that's really how Twitter started, which was, they kind of, to some degree, it's not even fair to call it a pivot, because it wasn't an insight that they had from Odeo that led them there necessarily. Lyft was another one. When they came in, they were called Zimride. And the founders, one of the founders had worked for, I believe, the Department of Transportation, if I'm not mistaken. And he had done this analysis which said the utilization of a car in LA, for example, is 1.1. So 1.1 people per car in LA. He's like, if you can move that up to 1.3, there's no traffic in LA, which is a crazy thought, right? So he's like, how do we help make that happen? And initially they launched, it was a ride-sharing platform for college campuses and office complexes. So they came out with that to try to get people to, carpool and do that more effectively. That wasn't quite working out as well. They bobbed and weaved a fair bit. And then they came in and said, okay, we've got this idea. We're not sure if it's legal or not, but it feels pretty compelling. And Ann and Mike, who were, and Ann, who's the other co-founding partner of Floodgate, had led that deal. And she's like, okay, so, kind of illegal? Like, what do you mean? It's like, no, it's going to be illegal. We got to figure out a way to skirt around that. And then as in the board, at the board discussion, they were trying to figure out if Uber is going to react. Because Uber back then was only doing black cars, and they were killing it. There was high margins there. They're doing extremely well. It's like, will Uber even care to kind of come down into this market? So they started out with a suggested tip. I don't know if you guys remember that. But yeah, it was what should the ride cost? Well, we can't charge because you have to have a medallion and all of that. We're just going to do the suggested tip. And Uber, to their credit, saw it as an existential threat. And Travis decides to kind of come down in a ride sharing and launches UberX. But that's another one that they kind of pivoted into this model. Twitch was the same. So Twitch started out as Justin.tv. So Mike was saying at that pitch, Justin Khan, one of the founders, walked into the pitch meeting, and he's got like this camera, and I think it was like an eyesight or something kind of strapped onto his baseball hat. And he's got wires going in his backpack, and he shows up in this coffee shop. And Mike was like, is this guy going to blow the place up? You know, what is this? And he starts talking, and you know, he's like, okay, so what's the business? And he's like, you know, do you mind? I'm going to live stream this meeting, and I'm going to live stream my life. And Mike is like, come on, man, how exciting is your life? How many people want to see what you're doing? Or is it really that exciting? Then why are you an entrepreneur? And you know, they talked a little bit about it, but Justin's insight was, you know, they had, first of all, there were four founders, all from MIT. And they were cranking. They were all living in a single apartment. They tried a bunch of stuff. They refused to die, essentially. So that was extremely compelling to see, number one. And number two, the insight was they had figured out how to do live streaming over the internet back then. This is, you know, I want to say 2009 or so time frame, maybe 2010, but it was difficult to do. So Mike was like, you know, count me in, sounds pretty interesting. They tried that for a while. Nobody wanted to see what Justin was doing all the time. But then they split the company into two companies, SocialCam, which saw, you know, a good 8-figure exit, and Twitch, because what they noticed on that side was a whole bunch of people were starting to kind of follow other people, especially when they started their own channel. So you could set up your own live stream. A lot of people were interested in watching other people play games. So they're like, we're just going to double down on that. And then next thing you know, they basically explode.
The thing that's so amazing to be about Twitch, watching my kids play, is who knew other people wanted to watch? My son's like, this is the best guy in the world. Of course you want to watch him. But there's really, I mean, you've really proven that you double down on the tenacity of these founders and believe them, because there was no data to suggest, oh, yes, people want to watch other people playing video games. I mean,
Right.
or people want to communicate in 140 characters.
Right. And you know, there's a set of investors who just look and measure the data when the companies get further along. The stage we're at, it's unclear oftentimes. And you know, we joke we're either too early or way too early in some of these investments. But the hope is that, you know, the founder has some, basically some deep insight, ideally that not very many people believe in. And that's usually where the big ones come from, and definitely on the consumer side.
Yeah.
You know, so you'll see a lot of these copycat businesses that show up. You know, folks often ask about, you know, the electric scooters business and why those have become billion-dollar plus entities.
Why is that?
You know, it's one of the few cases where you're starting to see an adoption that looks pretty similar to what ride sharing looked like. So the other thing that we try to look at is what's that WTF moment. So we call that, you know, the what the frick moment, when you look at the app and basically your mind's blown, and or whatever the offering is, and life as you know it has fundamentally changed. So in Lyft's case, for example, when you saw, or even in Uber, when you saw where your car was, you saw a photograph of the driver, you get in, the person greets you by your name, you have a number to call them. You know, their credit card machine, that you don't even need one. It's not, you know, a smelly taxi that has all the other issues. You don't know if they're going to stop. You know, drivers talking on the phone in a cab. The experience was completely different. And once you took it, you're just, if you can avoid it, you're never going back. Right, so we tend to look for things like that. And I think in the scooter side, it was pretty similar. Like I see one, I need to get a few blocks, I just get on one, I go to the next stop, I get off. And the adoption has just been hockey stick. So I think that's been...
Totally agree with you on the Uber thing. I put my 13 and 14-year-olds in them. I get a text when they're going. I get a text when they got there. I love it. The scooter thing, I took one the other day for the first time in front of the WeWork on Barton Springs, and I screamed the entire way down the street, and everyone thought there was something crazy was happening. Took me $3 to learn, and I still don't know how to do it. So
but there's also, you know, there's the ER visits have gone up. You know, there's a bunch of issues.
Oh yeah, I have a couple friends in slings. Let's be honest.
Yep.
So I have another question, but before we move on, this is a great topic that we're having here. Does anyone want to jump in with a question, or should we move on to the next one? Okay.
I have a question about Twitch. I thought about this. I'm sure Justin also thought about it. Why not focus on famous people? Many people want to see what Kardashian does every day. What her first person is looking at at all times, and not just her, well, celebrities, a lot of
Sure.
icons and Instagram personalities
Right.
and whatnot. Why not? Did they thought about this?
Good question. I'm not super close to the deal, number one, but number two, I'm not cool enough to do consumer stuff. You know, I do all enterprise investing. I just.
Justin will fail. No one cares about it, but everyone cares about personality.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. And I think there's, you know, now it's part of Amazon, so it'll be interesting to see where they go. I think there's a lot of, you know, the rights management side. There's just the volume of stuff people want to see. If you look at, I mean, you can make the similar argument with folks like YouTube, right? I mean, why don't the Kardashians have a YouTube channel, for example? I mean, they don't even need a third-party intermediary on that side. But you know, there's just other ways in which they get that exposure. They try to control their brand a lot more. So there's, yeah, you know, I'm sure there's a variety of reasons that are, you know, go above my head. But I can tell you how the infrastructure would work if they wanted to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As much as I'd like to admit that I don't follow the Kardashians, Kim does look pretty great right now. So I think we'll move on.
Sounds good.
When talking about the next 2 decades of computing, Mike Maples Jr. has said there's no one better expert to help navigate the landscape than you. Which is a great compliment. You've led investments around Workboard, Leaf Logistics, Tetra Science, TextIQ, and Myra Labs. So how did you evaluate these investments? And what do you, when you go to the Floodgate website, it starts with the expression prime movers. What do you all mean by that?
You know, there's oftentimes you'll meet entrepreneurs who are just interested in wanting to be an entrepreneur, right? And then there's a set of people we call prime movers who, regardless of whether you invest in them or not, that's not what they're in it for, right? I mean, they're going to change the world. They just see the world in a different way, and they believe that the others just haven't figured it out as yet, right? So those are the kinds of people we try to back as much as possible. You know, they oftentimes have a pretty deep insight about a space. They've got what we call founder market fit. So they've got, there's a reason why they're in that particular space more often than not. But with that being said, you know, there's the space you might start in might change, right? You might get into a different space, but there's this degree of kind of resilience that's hard to gauge. We try as best we can. Unfortunately, we've been wrong more often than we've been right. In several of these, we passed on deals we shouldn't have. You know, I wouldn't say we've invested in ones that we couldn't, but you know, in hindsight, there's some deals that didn't work out for a variety of reasons. So it's not like we have a secret formula, but we believe there's just a special kind of entrepreneur who this is their life's work. And if you look at a lot of the really, really successful companies, that's the only thing they ever did. You look at Facebook and, you know, Zuck might go on and do something else, but, you know, this is all he'd ever have to do. Look at Amazon, you look at, you know, Apple, Jobs was pushed out, but, you know, still, right? You look at Microsoft, you look at Oracle, just all these, you look at Dell, like all these companies, this is all they did. So the whole notion of, I'm in it because I want to be an entrepreneur, this is something that I'll try for a few years, then I'll go out and do something else, you know, that, the prime movers, the guys that, and gals that we've seen, they tend to just believe. And you can see it when you speak to a lot of them.
You can see it in their eyes.
Yeah, more often than not. Yeah.
Yeah, please. No, we love it.
You said there were some regrets as to your missed opportunity.
Sure.
I like to ask this question every time I have a panel.
Sure.
What was a good or an interesting story that you can tell us about one of those moments where you said? And then if you could tell us what's going on in your brain that kind of led to that decision.
Yeah. Yeah, we often ask that too, like, what the hell? Which talk about some of the deals that we missed or passed on, and what the hell were we thinking in some of those cases. So a lot of them, you know, the stage we invest at, it takes a while before you know if any of these are going to make it or be widely successful. So I've been with the firm a little over 3 years. So in my case, it's unclear if any of the misses were good decisions or bad. I can talk about a couple, but I think the bigger ones as a firm that we've missed on, the two ones that really, really hurt are Airbnb and GitHub. So with Airbnb, the founders came in, and a lot of people just passed because they had tried for a while. They had really pounded the pavement. It was called Air Bed and Breakfast, and I don't know if you guys remember this, but essentially, or have heard the story, but they were hawking. Their revenue model was you had to have an air mattress to be a host, And then they were selling breakfast cereal, so that was the breakfast. And they had actually made 2 kinds of cereal. This was in 2008, election year. So they had made McCain Crunches and and Obama O's, right? There was the Cheerios version. So they came into the pitch meeting and they had like, hey, check out our breakfast cereal. This is the packaging in the box. And Mike and Ann were like, well, what is this? You know, like, why would you want to let a stranger in on your couch, and how does that work? But there's something about the founders that was pretty compelling. So Mike tells the story, and I'm channeling my inner Mike, so to speak. But basically what he said was, he asked them, okay, what's your distribution strategy? And they said, we're going to the Democratic National Convention, which is going to be in Denver that year, and we're going to blow up. She said, okay, why is that? So they said, first of all, the DNC had moved from what I believe was going to be the Nugget Stadium to the Broncos Stadium, so the basketball stadium to the football stadium, just because of the demand and the number of people who wanted to show up. So it went from 20,000 to 80,000. All these people are going to descend into Denver. Plus, there's this whole kind of grassroots movement around Obama's election. You know, people wanted to kind of help your fellow brother and sister, so to speak. So they felt like it would be not too much of a stretch to imagine people opening up their homes to let other people in. And Mike was like, okay, sounds reasonable. And they were leaving like literally in the next couple of days or something like that. So he said, go there and let's talk post that. And they had kind of strategy to get in front of all the bloggers who were covering the space and get some coverage that way. Sure enough, they go there, they blow up, and they never came back.
Oh, that's
So it, you know, $35 billion of valuation later.
well, it's amazing when you think you have time, and then all of a sudden you don't have any time, and it happens to all of us. You had a question.
Yes.
I am curious about your WTF moment
Yeah.
that you touched on. Would you say that there's any common denominator between the ones that you've seen and how, like you talked about the look in their eyes, or is it like a culmination of the experience to get to that moment person on the street
Right.
who sees it?
No, I think it's more about the user experience that they put out, right? So when you look at the product, you look at the way they've thought about it, how well they've understood who their target user or customer is in this case, and how they've just packaged the solution that shows this kind of visceral understanding of the pain point in the market. So a lot of times you'll get people who are solving a problem, but it's, first of all, it may not be what we call a hair on fire problem, especially in the enterprise space. In this case, they've either lived or walked several miles in the economic buyer's shoes. They fundamentally understand what it takes to make that person successful, and then they've delivered a solution. It doesn't have to be finished, right? Because oftentimes you're working with MVPs or something like that. But it just shows that you've understood what they'd want to see, or you have this insight that allows you to experiment very quickly. So you're like, okay, these are my key assumptions going in. These are the experiments I want to run, and I will from there figure something out. And they've just been very thoughtful about the process. You know, in Lyft's case, it was the app and the UX that they'd kind of thought about, but it came about as a function of the experiments they were also running. You know, Chegg was another one where the way Mike puts that is, so Chegg started out, as you guys may or may not know, they do Netflix for textbooks, essentially. So all students, a lot of students today will rent their textbooks instead of buying them. And it's a subscription kind of, you know, it's an easy system. But when they started out, it started out as classifieds for college students. You know, it was kind of working, but nothing super sustainable, nothing super valuable. And what they realized, so they were down to literally a couple of pay cycles. And they were like, okay, let's take a step back. They had this kind of come to Jesus meeting. And it's like, if Facebook can't get classifieds to work, why will we? And if Facebook gets classifieds to work, why will we survive? So what they realized was they had started to see people wanting to buy textbooks. So they're like, we got to go all in on this side. And this is an exercise we tend to do with a lot of our companies, is we list out what we call the 100 key assumptions about your business. So doing 5, 10, 20, you know, is still pretty easy. Getting to 100 is pretty hard. So what are those key assumptions that you have? And then what's the criticality of getting them right? So if you get one wrong, what's the risk to the business? And which one? So for example, in Chegg's case, it was, you know, freshmen are going to rent more than seniors. You will rent more textbooks that are non-major subjects. Women will rent more than men, you know, stuff like that. So they sort of list all these out, and then you list out the criticality of those, which ones, if you get wrong, will scuttle the business. And then once you have that, then you start to prioritize those and then work through plans that figure out how do you go out and validate those assumptions. So, okay, this one, I really got to figure out if freshmen are going to do it or not. Or will people pay more than $4.99 for shipping, or whatever it might be. So we try to work with companies to get that, and then we try to gauge that going in. Like, is this how the founder is thinking? And does he or she realize that you're in experimentation mode? You have to, you're not going to know the answer going in, and if you do, we're probably at the wrong stage at this point. So we try to gauge that as best we can.
One of the things that I so enjoy about spending time with you is just how analytical you are. And it's
I mean,
fabulous.
at this stage, there's not much to go on.
Yeah,
either, right?
but it's assumptions. And the other day, Ashley and Arjun and I had a call to organize for this evening, and you shared with us statistics about returns in the industry. And I feel like they're just stunning about what kind of value creation is created by VCs, and maybe when entrepreneurship is not the right path. And I would love for you to walk us through some of those stats.
Yeah, and just on the VCs creating value, I mean, we're at the end of the day, we're brokers, right? So we take our limited partners' money and we try to convince smart people to take our money. All the work is done by the entrepreneur. We've all been entrepreneurs before. It is that's the hero's journey. That's, so they get 110+% of the credit. Well, it's not like we take 10% of the credit away, or we're a drag, but for the most part,
You get a pat on the back.
and hopefully some good financial returns would always be good, but yeah. So the entrepreneurs are doing all the work. I think the stats, as you put it, are, at least for me, were super insightful to learn about and see, because going in, I'd been a former entrepreneur prior to this. And when especially early on, I'd meet a deal and I'd be like, oh yeah, I can see how they do X, Y, Z, and they'd close a couple of deals and they're off to the races. And then, it was a pretty profound point, which ought to have been fairly obvious, that Mike put to me. He's like, look, at the end of the day, there's 10 companies that matter. I was like, what do you mean? He says, okay, let's look at the numbers. So, and I went and re-looked at them. So since, let's say 2005, they've been about 15 to 20,000 companies that have raised some sort of angel money. And the number of public exits that have happened since 2000 that are worth over $1 billion are 66, right? If you look at the unicorns, let's assume a bunch of them are not going to stay unicorns anymore. As Mark Suster said, there's a bunch of donkeys in party hats pretending to be unicorns, so there's a bunch that won't make it. And then there's a set that are legit, right? So you look at that, there's 250, give or take. So there's a very, very small number that actually make it. And when you peel that back on a per year basis, there literally are 10 companies that will capture 97+% of the venture returns for that cohort. So if you're not in one of those 10, you look at a company like Y Combinator, right? They've had, or an organization like, they've had 1,900+ startups. Airbnb alone is worth more than all the others combined. Stripe now, probably number 2, same thing with them, right? Dropbox. Hopefully more. Right. But hopefully past is not prologue, right? Yeah. But hopefully past is not prologue, and there's a set of, so that's kind of the yeoman's work that Capital Factory and stuff like that are doing to help more people come up, because there is all the ingredients are there. But if you look at it, there's very few companies that actually make it. So now you could be optimizing for different things, but when you look for financial return, that number is staggeringly small. When we talk to our limited partners, we're asking them, if a fund goes sideways, what does that look like? So for those of you who as you may or may not know, limited partners are the people who give us money, and then we take that money and invest it in a bunch of companies. So these are, in our case, endowments, fund of funds, guys like that. So when we ask them, they're like, look, all we're looking for, so the LPs who had a 40+ year relationship with Accel, they're like, just the fact that Accel was, led the Series A in Facebook made that 40-year relationship worth it. All the others could have basically gone to zero, but it's just that one deal, because the hits are so outsized, and that's the part that becomes easy to forget. So as we look at that, from our perspective, it's now either you get a big chunk of some of the companies that are smaller, or you get a big piece, and it's a power law outcome. And so at least what the data suggests is the returns tend to be skewed in the favor of the massive outcomes. So that's the part which is just kind of interesting to learn and see.
Go for it. Jump in.
So I have a question, because y'all are talking about companies that matter. I was a banker for 10 years.
Sure.
And I've run 4 businesses.
Sure.
There are 4.5 million companies
Sure.
4.5 million
Right.
companies in the United States of America. There may be 5 people in this room that can grow $1 million company, make 600 grand a year, and be totally happy.
Right. Right. Yep.
Then it goes to 1.2 million that do between $1 million and 10 million in revenue.
Right.
1.2, so a quarter of that. Then it goes to 92,000 companies that do more than $10 million in revenue. And if you're going to talk about what matters, there's only
Right.
2,500 companies, but they still only make up half the revenue in this
Right.
country. So,
Right.
I look at it from a banker's perspective. I can get a 13% internal rate of return.
Right. Right.
I can be with you guys for 10 years and still only get
Absolutely. Yep.
I'm an LP in real estate. I get 30%
Sure.
return
Sure.
all day long, taking very little risk.
Yeah. No. Perfect. So.
So be careful about saying what matters.
No. A fair point. Correct. So. Yeah. And from. No, and it's not. This is not meant to at all discourage. I mean, our job is to invest in those companies. When we look, it's not a judgment on the quality or the caliber of the business. So it depends on what the entrepreneur is optimizing for. So if you're optimizing for lifestyle, if you're optimizing for style of work, you're optimizing for working with your buddies, whatever that might be, they're fantastic businesses to be had. They're just not venture scale. Right? So in our opinion, a venture scale business is eventually publicly traded, hopefully worth north of $1 billion. And what we've also seen is the really, really successful in the tech space businesses have gone public 6 to 10 years after launch. Those are the ones that continue to capture value. So from a venture investor perspective, those are the deals we're looking for. That's not a judgment on the quality or caliber of the entrepreneur or the business. You just want to make sure you understand what you're getting into going in. So as we look at that, the VC side of things are skewed towards the big hits.
Yes.
Yes.
So you talk a bit about kind of the different criteria that you will look for and like the investment entrepreneurs. I know one recent development that I read about is kind of bigger funding, like more funding coming from a single venture investor. And I was wondering, like, how does that, like, for example, like
Yeah.
how does that influence you kind of investment?
Yeah, I mean, they've definitely changed the game. When you come in, you come in and you basically drop a napalm bomb on the space. It sucks all the oxygen out. So if you're an investor in one of the competing companies, you're just not going to be able to keep up. So it's interesting. We've spent some time with the folks at several places, including SoftBank, and from what we can tell, it feels like their vision is basically, you look at the top 5 highest market cap companies in the world today, they're all tech companies. From what we can tell, their vision is the top 2,000, the global 2,000 is going to churn. They're all going to be tech companies in their vision of the world. If you look at a lot of the existing incumbents, folks feel like they're private equity companies in drag. They're borrowing money, buying back their own stock, not necessarily innovating. So they want to own 20 to 40% of the next global 2,000, and they're willing to buy their way in. So they're taking much more of the Amazon style play where I'll lose money for a while until I capture as much of the market as I can. And then maybe I'll start to show a profit or whatever it is, right? Whatever your economics look like. So that's kind of the, when they come in and if let's say you're a WeWork competitor and WeWork raises $4.2 billion, right? I mean, which VC is going to take the bet on the other side if your business requires venture capital to keep going? Maybe some people will, but then it becomes almost like poker, who's got the biggest pot. So it's definitely changing dynamics, and the way we feel that is a lot of guys who used to traditionally be in growth, so I could be running a $5 billion, $10 billion fund. Now the Vision Fund is out and it's $99 billion, and they've got plans to raise another $300 billion. So you're probably going to need to change strategy quite quickly. So a lot of them are coming lower down or earlier on. That's putting pressure on the guys who normally do A's and B's. Now people are sitting on big funds. There's a lot of management fees that people get if you're sitting on a big fund. So the way management fees work is you get typically 2% of the size of your fund every year to spend on expenses and salaries. So if your fund's $2 billion, you're making $40 million or whatever it is every year. So why not? So a bunch of people do that. So that starts to kind of add up. So the incentives start to get skewed. But yeah, there's definitely pressure, and then people have the pressure to deploy more capital quickly into companies and go raise your next fund. So you've seen fund sizes grow, rounds grow, expenses start to kind of go up. I mean, look at some of these startups, and we joke that when we'll go to meet even some of our portfolio companies, I mean, their snacks are better than our snacks. Yeah. You've got 5 flavors of coconut water, when you walk in, which is
No,
crazy.
we discussed the coconut water options the other day.
Yeah.
And that's scary
It's frightening.
Can
yeah.
you talk a little bit about? I loved it. Would you say the donkeys and party hats?
Yeah, that
Let's
wasn't
talk
my
about
my phrase. And it's not just the unicorns, right?
Yeah.
But as we start to as we start to see some of these costs in a lot of these companies, I mean, they're starting to go high. So, as we look at, especially on the B2B side, there's an interesting blog post that's out there, or deck that's out there that talks about units of value. So it talks about units of value, and it's by Jerry Chen from Greylock. So it's a really good blog post where they talk about, I mean, it's to some degree it's simple math, but there's quite a profound insight there. So if it's like, if you want to do $100 million in revenue, how many customers do you need? So if you're selling $1 million ACV, you need 100 customers. If you're Twilio or somebody, you need hundreds of thousands of those because your price per customer or per transaction is low. And what they found was the dead zone is companies that charge typically, $300 to $10,000 a year, just because it's probably your product's too complex to sell self-service over the web, and it's too expensive for you to commission a sales team to go do that. But what we're seeing now is, especially if you plan to run your sales team, let's say in San Francisco or the Bay Area, your ACV has to be higher than 30,000. There have been some posts that have gone out on that side. So how do you just cost effectively run and build a team when your ticket prices have to be higher? So folks are starting to look at other geos.
I'm pretty sure your Capital Factory could help solve that problem.
Absolutely, but even just, and this is just purely on not necessarily super technically skilled inside sales people who are really good at what they do, which is prospect and close deals.
Yep.
You just can't cost effectively do that.
Go for it. That's you.
Yep.
Okay, great. Hi, Jenny, founder of InCommon, and I've got questions on two topics. Take your pick of either one.
Sure.
Find more interesting. So Eric Schmidt recently went on record. He was stated as saying that he foresees the internet being split into two, bifurcating into sort of non-China and China. And there's a lot of just growth coming out of China. My friends in Shanghai tell me, there's a whole lot going on there. There's also the topic of Jason Calacanis put out a blog about, hey, batten down the hatches, raise now while you can. There's some signs that we're headed towards a down economy, or a down market. You don't want to raise in a down market. Are either of those events sort of factoring into your decision making, your kind of calculus pattern matching as a firm?
Sure.
Is there anything that you would recommend us sort of on the ground in the trenches take from that?
For what it's worth, right? One person's opinion. So we're a small firm. We've got four partners, 3 investing partners. We're just not tooled to invest in China. From the outside looking in, looks super interesting and exciting. You look at, and as much of this as much credence you want to lay on this, but you look at Midas list, #1 investor, Neil Sheng, Chinese investor, a lot of big hits there, huge addressable market for a lot of things. What the hell do we know about that market, right? So we haven't done anything. I think there's one company that we've got that ended up there that we've got a small stake in. There's, and I guess Eric Schmidt has valid reasons. Google's trying to figure out how to navigate that. It's above my head. I don't know much about that market. I'm not going to posit that I have any expertise there. On the second question, it's interesting. I think if you think back to, so Eugene Kleiner, one of the founders of Kleiner Perkins, put it quite well, where he's like, when there's money on the table, you take it. Basically, when they pass the hors d'oeuvres, you take 2, right? You just never know when it's coming back. And I think that always holds true for your business. A lot of times people will, potentially try to over-optimize on their current raise and stuff like that, which is good, right? You should be more dilution sensitive than you are valuation sensitive. And if there is money that you need to have, if you feel like you've got enough room enough runway where in case the market turns, and look, people can pontificate. Folks have been saying the market's going to tank for a while. Folks have been saying the bull market's going to carry on. They're both wrong, right? You just never know. So I think all you can do is build your business as best you can, and try to be, really understand the mechanics of your business in terms of unit economics and stuff like that. And the less dependent you are on external capital, the more in control of your business you will be. Like, there are a set of businesses that will continue to kind of lose money for a while, and if you are just dependent on the next round of financing to happen, you better make sure you are one of those best companies, because I don't think the best companies will ever have trouble raising. You know, I mean, never say never, but for the most part, if you're really, really good, high quality companies will always attract dollars. There's always somebody who wants to get in, even in down markets. And you look at all the, a lot of the companies that are now publicly traded or are on the cusp or precipice of doing that, a lot of them have raised money in probably the worst of times, or started at those times, right? So I think the good companies will always do that. The question is, you know, what do those good companies look like, and how do you start to kind of get up there? But if there's money on the table, I'd strongly encourage people not to necessarily overthink that. Take your time. The more important thing is find out who you want to have on your cap table and who do you want to have in the foxhole with you, because that's more important than you know, somebody writing you a check. Because you know, like they say, I mean, you can divorce your spouse, you can't divorce your investor. So as you think about that, you just want to have people that you want to work with through hopefully the wild success or the bitter end. Sure.
So there's a lot of things in the world to be excited about.
Sure.
But what trends and developments are there? Specific technologies? Are there specific kinds of people? Are there specific regions? What are you like? That's really what I want to get involved in.
Yeah, you know, it's to some degree you want to have prepared mind going in, but to a large part there's, you know, the smart entrepreneurs. Nobody was looking for what's a social network that helps college students connect, or what's these messages that disappear, or whatever they might be on the consumer side. I feel like on the enterprise side, though, there are more things that we tend to get interested in. Hopefully we're right in some of them, but you know, who knows? So the ones that I'm super excited by, I feel it's still day one in the journey to the cloud. Amazon, I didn't expect them to be the winners. I've been following this space since the early 2000s. I've done a field study and a bunch of work around utility computing. I thought it was IBM and Microsoft's game to lose. I guess they kind of lost it. Microsoft's still fighting the good fight. IBM's hanging in there. But Amazon came out of nowhere.
You think we're at day one?
Absolutely.
Really?
Yep. Amazon especially, but I just...
I'm shocked by that.
Yeah, so if you think about it, there's, you know, 3.7 trillion that gets spent on premise today.
Yeah. I know it's still like 70%, right?
One more time.
70%?
No, so if you look at the amount of revenue that Amazon, Microsoft, and Google are making, it's probably 40 billion or so. If you believe that the benefits that the cloud provides, whether it's you know, made now accessible with all the security and stuff that you need, a majority portion of that is slowly going to shift to the cloud. So it's still early days. There's still a lot of large enterprises, small and mid-sized enterprises that don't have the skill, don't have the, they're still concerned, they don't have the project plans in place, so they're just getting warmed up. A lot have already moved, but a lot are still going to move. And it feels like that trend is fairly relentless now. These take generations to move. Right, it's not like we'll build a new city and then all the citizens just show up there. It's slowly over time going to migrate. So we feel like that's a pretty fertile area in general. There's you know, enhanced trends on that side that continue to happen. So we're excited about the edge. So what's you know, edge computing starting to show up. If you think about moving decisioning closer to where the data is being collected or done, there's laws of physics that come into play there, right? So if you think about it, there's I think it's like 20 seconds or so, I could have my numbers wrong, for light to travel from Boston to the Valley. So if you think about a round trip, and if you have your data center in the Valley, and you're a self-driving car, it's going to move like 10 feet in 8 milliseconds, sorry. So if you need to make a decision, should I hit the brakes or swerve?
Could be dangerous. Yeah.
Lives are at stake, right? So you got to make decisions closer to the point. But so now they're moving it onto the chip, onto the device. But also there's a set of data that will probably need to run, you know, down the street or closer to Boston as opposed to sending it all the way back. So there's things like that we feel, business models that need to come up, technology that needs to kind of address that, services that will need to come up, migration of existing apps that do this. So that's another fertile area for us. And you know, any kind of, there's a lot of talk about AI and machine learning. I feel that the plumbing and the infrastructure on that side is going to get addressed probably by the incumbents. And by the incumbents, I mean Microsoft, Google, Amazon, IBM. But there's still the application of that continues to be pretty interesting. So that's another area that we're interested in. Unfortunately, the more we spend on cybersecurity, the more cybersecurity issues arise. It feels like they're not correlated.
Valuations are stunning.
But yeah, but it's also it's always cat and mouse, and there's so many new attack vectors that the adversaries are opening up. The way your infrastructure is starting to look now, it's all over the place. So that's another kind of ripe area. It feels like it's been for a while, which is unfortunate, but yeah, that's right. So those are some others.
Any vertical specific questions? Yes, please. Oh, that's cool.
Right. Right, right. 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 Yeah, it's unfortunate, right? Just because a VC decides to or not, or decides to invest or not invest is not always a reflection of the quality or caliber of the business. And in this case, there's a lot of fear, and I personally am also concerned about just investing in hardware in general. I don't know enough about it. I've never done it. And I'm not skilled enough to figure out supply chain logistics or other unit costs, things like that. And unfortunately, it feels like a lot of other VCs fall in a similar kind of place. I don't have necessarily a good answer for you, man. That's right. Yeah. I mean, and just because a VC is not, we just don't have, speaking for myself, I just don't have the skill to invest in that space. So, if I come in, let's say we're investors, I'll be like, dude, you should buy low and sell high. I don't know how it can be insightful or helpful on any of those kinds of things. I'm sorry? Yeah, for the most part, we've usually now. With that being said, there are a few hardware-specific accelerators and folks trying to buck that trend. So there are people trying to do that. There are specialists. There are not as many. It's, to be honest, VC is not. It's hard work, but it's not complicated. For the most part, right? And in certain cases, you want that specialized knowledge. You want that specialized insight. And there are people out there doing it. There unfortunately not as many. Who invests in SaaS, you'll find a whole bunch of people doing it, right? Which also leads to competition and all of that. But I think a lot of this is, as I think Josh said too, is investor selection. And that pool is small. But, if you've got something that's pretty compelling, hopefully you can convince the right people. And if not, prove them wrong. Folks will be more than happy to come chase you on the next one, unfortunately, right? But it's, don't have a good answer for you on that.
I think Josh had something to add.
Sure. No, I think, yeah, to a large degree. So I think the PE guys, their IRR requirements, while high, tend to be slightly different. What they look for, they're happy to roll up their sleeves and get involved. So Vista especially, they're kind of, it's their business now, right? So they'll kind of get into it and spend a lot of time. It feels like they're, which is why we were joking and calling Oracle and IBM also private equity companies in drag, right? The innovation to some degree, while it's coming, is not in the same volume that it used to be of the companies of the old. So PE is definitely becoming an exit, because what's happening is some of these valuations have gotten quite inflated. So even your regular M&A guys are not as active. Google used to buy a bunch of companies. We had the soft landings that Yahoo would offer a whole bunch of people. A lot of that's gone away. And it is a flight to value. And then the private equity guys don't overpay. They're really sharp about it. They get into the numbers. They're dispassionate about the business. Venture on the other side, they tend to get super passionate about the vision and all of this stuff. And private equity is like, the business of business is business. What do you guys have? What do the spreadsheets say? Numbers don't lie. So they kind of get in there and they roll up. I think the new IPO. Not as much. It's more of that. At our stage, we just don't know where they're going to go. We've changed strategy in a few cases where we can talk about that in terms of what we see of companies that kind of get stuck. But I think the new IPO, as opposed to private equity, is actually the SoftBanks of the world. Right? If you some people will kind of tongue-in-cheek also say, well, you had to IPO because you couldn't get anybody else to pay more. But when you're raising those kinds of crazy rounds, and founders and early investors are taking money off the table in several cases, you've got what you need to kind of keep. You don't have to deal with a lot of the regulation and reporting and all of that stuff. So you try to delay it as much as you can.
Got it. We're going to do one last question on a different topic. Then we're going to go to rapid fire, and then we're going to go have fun. Yeah.
Sweet.
So, okay. Last question. You went to UT. You participated in clubs. You had fun. You went to Harvard. You did the same. You read books. You listen to podcasts. What should we be doing to get smart like you?
Oh, well, I think most folks are probably already there. So, so books-wise, we have a 3-year-old at home, so I don't get to read much fiction. It's pretty much all nonfiction stuff.
Giving Tree's a good one.
Yeah, I've read that with my kid, absolutely. Or A Busy, Busy World by Richard Scarry. Yeah, that's quality stuff. But no, as you think about, for me, the investing primarily in B2B, one of the things I try to look for, work with entrepreneurs on, is just go-to-market motion and just the ability to actually sell. So not everybody has the unfair advantage of, let's say, a Capital Factory, where you've got a whole bunch of people willing to give you feedback as actual economic buyers right away. But how do you, especially if you're a technical founder, how do you figure out, how do you convince people on the other side to buy? There's a couple of good books over there that I like. One is the Sales Acceleration Formula, Mark Roberge. So he's super early on at HubSpot. Sorry, it's the Sales Acceleration Formula by Mark Roberge. I think it's Roberge. And he led, I believe, the inside sales team. And if you think about, or if you guys know HubSpot, a lot of it was bottoms-up selling, inside sales, pull customers in via content and other kinds of mechanisms, and then convert them. So that's a pretty good book. Then there's Predictable Revenue by Aaron Ross, which is much more tops down. So Aaron Ross was the guy who was tasked with doing enterprise sales at Salesforce. So he came in and said, well, if the goal of pretty much, at least on the enterprise side of business, is to get to predictable revenue. So if I can get to predictable revenue, a lot of the other things fall in place. And that usually happens, that's the point when you should go out and look for your Series A. So we look for stuff there. So those are a couple of good books. Make Big Happen. That's a good one too. I'm drawing a blank on the Make Big Happen. And it is by, yeah, the name will come to me. I think it's, I forget, I apologize. But essentially it talks about just how do you think about planning for the things you want to do personally, professionally, and in your giving life. So, you think about what is it that you want to do, how do you measure whether you're doing it, what can get in the way. So just, it's an interesting framework about how you put that in place.
One of the things that I've recently become very interested in is how formulaic like SaaS fundings are, with like the 40% growth, and then are there model or blogs or things that people should be reading? Because I didn't realize that it's really pretty formulaic in some ways.
Yeah. So if you're looking at SaaS or usually Series B kind of investing, which is a little further on, Tomas Tanguz over at Redpoint writes, he's the SaaS guy. He opines a lot about public companies, metrics that he sees in the early stage ones. Both Andreessen as well as Social Plus Capital have some good set of guiding metrics that they provide and what they tend to look for. There are a set, especially as you start getting into later rounds, the growth guys, the Series B, C, D guys, and definitely the private equity people, it is spreadsheet investing for the most part. So they're looking at the metrics, they're looking to see is the business truly healthy, and they can understand and start to pick that up. Like, are you showing a lot of revenue, but do you have a leaky bucket? Are your leads coming in, not enough converting? How is it moving? How predictable are they? Things like that. So they've got a good set of kind of instructional content that
And
helps you
where
think
can
about
I
that.
get that instruction book?
Yeah, so I think
that book.
Andreessen's blog
Okay.
has it. Social Plus Capital has some
Okay, I'm
posts
getting
on it. There's stuff there that really helps.
Yeah, no,
But again, there's if you believe that that doesn't quite accurately measure the health of your business, or there's a different metric, you should bring that up.
Yep.
And there's folks usually have interesting ways in which some businesses are just new, so they try to figure out, like in gaming, there's this notion of the ARPDAU, average revenue per daily active user. So they start to figure out, how do I maximize that? How do I move that piece forward? So different kind of businesses have their own nuances, or you might need to create something that shows what the health of your business really is. Stay away from vanity metrics, right? I mean, being massively obvious. But those are the ones where, it makes your business look good, you think investors want to see it, but it doesn't, at the end of the day, it doesn't fundamentally doesn't give you the guidance that you might need for your own business. To thine own self be true, so to speak, right? So just don't fool yourself. It eventually catches up. So just whatever helps you get and really understand, A, the levers in your business, B, what do you need to do to move them? And then where do you, benchmark-wise, where do you need them to be? So that 40%, stuff like that. The triple, double in terms of where you want, what the growth of the business needs to look like. Those are definitely important because they're just kind of tried and tested for a lot of businesses. So if you're not doing that, and you should be, you might want to go look at it. But if you believe that those are wrong because your business is unique, that should be expressed.
Any last minute advice? I mean, you've been back in Austin for 24 hours now? 18 hours? So you've been back in Austin, you've been on campus, you've been to the Herb Kelleher Center, you've been to McCombs, you've been to Capital Factory. What do you think? What do we got going on here?
There's so much stuff going on for sure.
Yeah?
It's I was here a couple of years ago, and then I hadn't come back for a while. A lot of amazing stuff going on. There's so much that the city has to offer. It absolutely broke my heart to leave. I remember there's this, I think it was an article in ESPN of all places that I'd read, back when I had time to read that too.
Still do.
Yeah,
On the plane.
that's right. Yeah. So it was an article about Austin, and they talked about how Austin had basically found this fountain of youth that Ponce de Leon was searching for his whole life. And he talks about how every year, thousands of freshmen descend. They spend the 4 best years of their life here and leave, for the most part, and spend the rest of their lives trying to figure out how to get back.
Yeah.
A lot of magical stuff going on, for sure.
Professor Burga, what's our slogan? What startups here changes the world?
Yeah, absolutely.
So much.
Absolutely.
Andrea, you might have one of these, but an honorary Texas entrepreneur.
I can't imagine anything here with the cute hashtag that we're all
Thank you so much. Awesome.
If y'all will join us downstairs for a celebration on the first floor, we'll have the reception down there. Thank you for
Thanks
coming.
for the great question. That was fun.
Helpful. Yeah.
Fabulous. Was it okay? Good.
That was incredible.
Incredible. Okay.
I mean, that was just so. I love what you said. Here, this is for you. You might also.
Yeah.
Thank you.